what I think any creative person can do is just bring your personality to the table. Like, that's the only thing you really need, is to have a really good disposition and bring an interesting perspective. That's, as a creative, as a producer, as an editor, as any component in that creative process, like, there's no real faucet for creative ideas, right? It doesn't only come from a CCO or an art director or a copywriter, or, it comes from everywhere.
All right, welcome back to Step Into the Sandbox. We're here with Gus Gomez, who I've known for quite a while. Actually, our parents have known each other since before we were born.
Yep.
Gus is a senior integrated producer at RBB Communications. Is it Communications?
It's Communications. That's what we do.
Correct.
Communications.
Correct. He formerly worked at the Community, an ad agency, and has been a producer and worked other roles over the years. But I'll let you introduce yourself so that people can get to know you.
I mean, you pretty much got it. The only thing is I got type 1 diabetes as well. And yeah, like you mentioned, before I did agency work, I worked as a freelance producer, director, and editor, and I got to work on some of the coolest projects. Honestly, as a freelancer, I've been grateful. Like, and throughout my kind of career, it's dumb to call it that, but I've been always like around people that were willing to give other people opportunities. So that's like David Verjano at Penelican gave me my first role on a set, and through that I met awesome DPs like Fini, a great editor, and David Marin. Like, all these core groups of people that I've just been working with my entire life, I met on my first set, and it's changed the way that I work and the way that I approach work. Having that kind of mentality, and I feel like it's every town has it, but like Miami, it's always been special to me, especially in work, because it's allowed me to explore both, like, what it means to be a general market producer versus what it means to be a Latin American or Hispanic producer.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
Duality is interesting. It's interesting because it either makes you better at what you're doing, or it kind of like whatever that means, it dictates the way that you approach work, which I think is cool.
And we already kind of got the idea that you're born and raised here in Miami.
Yeah.
Have you lived in any other parts of the country over your career?
I mean, never lived. I always worked out of Miami as a headquarters. I think what's been interesting about the role that I've had, just even from when I started to where I'm at now, is like the opportunity to travel, especially for long periods of time, is always there. There's been projects where I've worked, 4 or 5 months in another state, and then come back home to Miami or whatnot. But yeah, I've always considered Miami headquarters. It's like it's a little special to me. It's like it's not only about the family, but it's like the only place that I felt kind of comfortable in the Hispanic culture. I love the fam, and I love the vibes here. I think like there's no town that beats it.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I obviously agree with that, and I feel like there's just the multicultural aspect to it kind of keeps it interesting and makes it very unique to any city or state, like across the country. But what I really want to get into is understanding a little bit more about your role and your craft.
Yeah.
We like talking about the creative process here, so I'd like to dive into the producer role and what it's like for you to, how'd you get into it in the first place, and then kind of a little bit about your day-to-day.
Yeah, it's a great, I mean, like, I think it's, when I was growing up, I never, and when I got like hit with the idea of what I wanted to do, was never to be a producer, right? I always grew up watching films all the time, and like watching Indiana Jones and Star Wars like everybody else on VHS. And I remember there was a point where I was watching, it's like so annoying that I'm going to say it, but Empire Strikes Back, the best one. And I just remember seeing it and feeling like, like somebody made that. And I don't know what that means, right? So then I started investigating it myself. Like, what does it mean to make a film? And through that, I found that I was really, really interested in creative visuals. So when I started, that was my intent, to be, a director of photography like Roger Deakins, or any of these like fantastic DPs. As I continued working in Miami and other states, I saw the amount of talent everywhere, right? And not only in the US, just like everywhere. There's so many talented people like DPs and whatnot. So I was like, not to say that I was like, oh, I'm not gonna make it in that, but I was like, I figured at that point that what I really liked was the creative collaboration of making things, right? So that's what led me into being a producer. I joined a company out of Fort Lauderdale and helped them build out a production studio where we were shooting almost every day. And in that was pretty much my first kind of experience as a producer for an agency, if it was an in-house agency. And I realized at that moment that, like, shit, I actually love it. And thinking back, when I was a kid, my mom, seeing that I was interested in creative, gave me a book on like what it means to be a producer. I immediately saw it. I was like, this is boring. I don't want to do this. Forget it. And end up being like, it's the shit I really like doing. It's for me, it's always been about making cool stuff in whatever capacity that is. And I'm like one of those people that really just likes to get my hand in everything, which I think is what a really good producer does, right? It's understanding creative. It's understanding the client's needs, and it's understanding the entirety of the holistic picture to be able to execute against what everybody wants.
Yeah.
And different tiers, you have to deal with like different levels of egos or, different types of personalities.
There's talent involved.
There's a lot, once you get into like production, like the prep work is super important. Some people hate it. It's really, really, you have to be detailed. As you're talking about, you could be shooting outside of the U.S. You have to plan for logistics. When we were shooting outside of the U.S. for a project, we were shooting through COVID. So imagine you have to coordinate talent. It's a 3-day shoot. The director's based in Spain. He can't travel out because of so it's like all of these pieces you need to kind of help wrangle and make sure that the job gets done to the client's specifications.
In that process of getting to build a production from the ground up, have there been elements to it that you realize, I love this part of it and I want to keep doing more of this, and then as well as the parts that you hate, you want to separate yourself from? Yeah,
like my big thing about the most enjoyable part of my job is getting to speak with people, right? And like I figure myself as somebody that's like just overall okay or pretty good at just having a normal conversation, being a human being. And I think that's like the one element that is missed a lot in any work, is just like that kind of, hey, remember that we're all just like here, and we're like, ultimately we're not doing any type of surgery, we're making you like a piece of material, like approaching it in that way and just being like a human being, I think is like the one thing that I bring to the table that I think is nice. But one thing that I've don't like, and I think this is only my experience with it, is post. When I get into post, I find that I end up losing a little steam, because those projects, you're talking about 3 or 4 months of production, right? So you're talking about two months of prep, you're shooting, then you go into post, and then you got to deal with that post schedule. Not to say that isn't like exciting, because a lot of cool stuff happens in post, but that's when I feel like people get creative ideas that should have been had 2 months ago, and it's like, well, we didn't shoot for that, stop having that idea.
Yeah.
And it's where a lot of things can go wrong, right, in post, when like everybody starts having those opinions. But I think, like, again, the challenge is always navigating those waters and getting whatever like that result is. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but that to me is my least favorite part. I like finding the talent that's right for the role, right?
Yeah.
And that's my favorite part about producing, is allowing for opportunity. Because when you work, especially when you get up different tiers of agency worlds or whatever, people know the big time directors. Obviously they're great, but why not X? Like, why not give opportunity to this person? They bring X, Y, and Z to the table. Like, for me, that's always been the coolest part, is like finding the best pieces of the puzzle.
So in piecing together the teams that are the rightest fit for the project, have there been some standout talent or standout collaborators that you've worked with that you feel have carved your path in your career, have helped you learn more?
Like I said at the top, like, I've always been, lucky to have been surrounded by people that gave those opportunities to me. Somebody that like honestly opened the first door was David Vargas. He's a director that works now in animation. and has been doing that for quite some time now in LA. And like I said, I think, he really opened my eyes, and not only did he like give me the opportunity, he like took the time to show me everything, right? And when you're talking about getting on your first set, like I was nervous as hell. I didn't know anything. Film has all the lingos that like makes you feel excluded if you don't know them. And David went to film school and I didn't, and I just knew that I wanted to do something. And he was like, yeah, come out and like, PA a music video. And like from that moment, I was absolutely in love with being on a set. And part of that is like, I like making real-time decisions. That's why I don't like post. Because when you're on a set and there's an issue, you have like 5 minutes to figure out how to get out of it. And I like that. I don't like, oh, why don't we take a day or 2 days to think about it? Like, we don't need that. This is stuff that's been planned. So, yeah, like David Vargas, I give a lot of credit to. Same thing with like David Money. A lot of Davids in my life, I'll tell you, sitting. Yeah. So it's like, and honestly, when I was at New You Creative in Fort Lauderdale, Matt Schwartz, who worked at MTV before, also gave me a ton of running room to be creative, to hone my skills as a shooter, as a post producer. I owe a lot to the experiences that I got early on. That set experience, having to do a lot of the stuff yourself, and there's no better way to learn than just doing it, right? Yeah. So, I mean, those guys I give a ton of credit to. And then, later on in my career at the community, of course, like Lori and Danielle and Ramon, I mean, all the leaders that I worked under at the community were like fundamental to my growing as a top tier, producer. And not to say that I am, because I'm not. I'm just like some joker from Hialeah. But like they honed my ability to make quality creative. And what I think any creative person can do is just bring your personality to the table. Like that's the only thing you really need, is to have a really good disposition and bring an interesting perspective. That's, as a creative, as a producer, as an editor, as any component in that creative process, like there's no real faucet for creative ideas, right? It doesn't only come from a CCO or an art director or a copywriter, or it comes from everywhere. Like looking out the window, you have a thought, and that's that.
Yeah. And there's two things that brings to mind from what you just said. Which one is your path, it seems, had a lot to do with learning on the job and learning in the field as opposed to learning in a classroom or learning in the academic environment. So would you say that a majority of your training has been just outside of school, outside of? Yeah,
totally. I mean, I did study. It's like interesting because I studied advertising at FIU, and I had some really great professors while I was there. But I was really interested in always like a creative output. So like when I was at FIU, I studied under the creative advertising track to be an art director because I really loved illustration. When I completed that, and I was like, I don't be an art director. That seems like so lame to be stuck in a freaking thing, having people yell at you because they think you have bad ideas. And I was like, at the end of the day, it's all subjective, dude. Like, there's people that like everything. Your idea, probably somebody will like it. And I hated that kind of that relationship with having a creative idea. Like, I always hated it. I always hated people like having not to say that your opinion's wrong, but like to be combative about it. I never really wanted to have my creative, juices be in that world. So like I said, after that, I learned pretty much everything on set. Like I didn't learn any of the film stuff. They didn't have a TV course. They didn't have like a film course. So I learned everything by doing it. They had one Final Cut program that I like learned, but I was like, at that point I had already known how to cut. Yeah. So I mean, everything it's due to like hustling and trying to find opportunity. And like I said, super grateful for the people around.
Got it. And in terms of your process and how you gather your inspiration, I think that a lot of creatives, even whether it's production, whether it's design, writers, they have a ritual or they have some sort of method that they like to use. Mm-hmm. Is there any kind of ritual that you've built over the years that you felt works for you when it comes to approaching a project?
That's an interesting question. I mean, like my big thing is, and one thing that I got taught very early on is like the key to being useful is to have really good ears, right? So that's really the only thing I bring, like, at the onset of a project. I'm not like a really ritualistic person, and I don't really have like something that I do every single time. But something that I find very interesting is like the people that have success listen well, right? And it's about like understanding every point of view. Depends on what exactly the project is, right? As a producer, you could be working as part of an agency. You could also be working as part of the production, right? Production house. And in that role, you're a little different.
Yep.
It becomes more tactical. So I think it's just about hearing everything, and letting it digest, like giving yourself the opportunity to not like spring into action because you feel like you need to spring into action. It's about listening, processing, and then making the right decisions based on those things. And like I've always tried to be one of those producers that doesn't only check out like, oh, these are the top like directors doing this. Like I've always looked at weird stuff.
Yep.
Like, oh, this is a really interesting visual director, and maybe we can bring his skill set to this project because we're doing X, Y, or Z. So it's like, I'm a big consumer of media, like I would say in every form, like, and I've been so impressed just the last like 4 years, honestly, since Vine. Like everything that I see, like I don't have, it's like a no judgment thing. I just look at it,
Yeah.
And like there's interesting bits of how people change the way that we're as advertising companies or producers or creatives are making content. Like we're pulling from them and to like I just like sitting for an hour and just like absorbing all that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how, at least in advertising, and I've seen in content creation specifically, that there's been this whole movement for, obviously you can't deny the influencers and how they've kind of like creeped their way into the conversation of, certain brands believe that they need to align with certain influencers, and then user generated content, right? Like the average person shooting something at their house.
Yep.
But then obviously it's now all being orchestrated, so it's becoming less
but I feel
organic.
Yeah, that's the big key though. I think like why it's so good is because they do it out of the passion for it, and like where big advertisers fail is because they don't. It's like monetizing something that's happening right now, and that's like the biggest bullshit in the industry. Like that was my like I hated that the most of working in any part of the creative. It's like, oh, well, they're doing this, let's do this. Or like, oh, this person's really big on Instagram. It's like, dude, that's not even the right like choices. You're just monetizing people's peaks, and like that's I have a jaded perspective about creative, especially in when you kind of like try to monetize it. I try to, it's like total hypocrisy because I do the same thing every day, but it's like one of my challenges. Like that's my big, like that's what I don't like about any of it. It's like, you should approach things as organically as possible and try to keep it that way. But when you're working at those levels, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's just, I almost have to reframe it when it comes to a client or someone that we're working on a project with. It's like when they want to suggest something along the lines of, well, we know that, posts with kids in them, with dogs in them, with coffee in them perform better just because of some data that we found online. And it's like, okay, well then what are you trying to optimize for? Are you trying to do this for vanity metrics? You just want more likes? You want more comments? Sure. I don't know how that helps your bottom line, or I don't know what your end goal is other than these things that are going to give you a dopamine hit. But I think it's a matter of reframing, because there's a lot of trend chasing and a lot of like this vanity metric put on a pedestal that I think that those are the challenges that we face on the creative side, dealing with clients.
Totally. And not only that, like there are companies that do that well, right? Like they are monetizing on these cultural moments, but they're doing it in such an organic way that it becomes really cool, right? There are right ways of doing it. And it's just about continuing that style of work. Because not only is it going to be successful because it's original and something that an audience could actually like, it's tangible. It becomes more tangible than watching another rerun of the commercial you saw 30 times where they're telling you where to go find your car, or like like what, like honestly, TV commercials don't even work anymore. Why were you even making them? Yeah, like I there's so many like, this is like looking at the advertising. So I don't know anything about it either. It's like, again, I'm some sort of joker from Miami, but I don't like. I have a weird experience with advertising, I think.
Yeah, one thing that we've been learning, and I think it's more exciting for us, is that instead of like building up for this huge campaign that's going to launch as a TV spot, we work a lot in the social space and running social ads, and we can test a lot more with smaller spends, and also actually test if there's any gravity to that piece of content or that idea or that messaging that we wanted to test out. So I think that that's put us in a position where it's less about, cool, we're not going to spend 3 months trying to do this just to launch it and see if there's results down the road. We can test it right now and see if there's anything associated with it. And now we go back to the drawing board, or we know what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, no, dude, totally. I mean, and again, I kind of feel like I've come across like a jerk off, but like, like some of the best work I ever did was working through the agencies. Like, I got to do really cool projects, and that's because of the collaboration with the creative department, the freedom that they gave me to bring on the right choices for the roles, the courage that the client had to trust us to do these wacky ideas. Like, it all has to work for it to be really good.
Yeah.
And when one of those things is like splinters off,
correct.
And I did the fart again, I'm so happy. When one of those things just splinters off, like, good luck trying to catch it.
Yeah,
It's a
it has to
train.
be a right fit for sure. I mean, sometimes you have a client that allows you to be creative and gives you the reins. Other times you have to be a little bit more restrained, and I feel like the creative suffers.
Yeah, but in no world do any of those experiences, even if they're awful in the moment, they're all building blocks for like how to make you a better version of whatever you're doing. Like, if you come across a really challenging client, you have to figure out how to navigate that, and that'll prep you for the next one. That's just the truth, dude. Like, there's no experience that's at the end of it, like, could be challenging, could be awful, could be like the worst project of your life, but at the end of it, you're gonna come away with something.
Yeah.
Like, be that, experience or a skill or a different perspective.
Something that I wanted to get into, because it's kind of like drawing from your inspirations. Like, what are some hobbies and what are some things you do outside of work?
Yeah. So, I mean, I got the greatest, I do every day for work what I really like doing. And that's being around film and cameras and shooting and, whatever. So, like, my hobbies outside of that are shooting photos, shooting creative videos, right? And also playing music. I think, like, the like I said, the greatest gift that I got is the faith in the people that I got around me to do those creative things, and the trust that I have from the people around me to do those at work. Super grateful for that. But outside of work, I continue that stuff, having to, like, or finish work and being able to do that on the side, like, for any project, like cool music videos, really interesting short films. Like, one of the things that I did was I bought a French Super 16 because I never shot on film before. Nice. And I rebuilt, like, I took it apart. There was a battery issue, rebuilt it, sent it to some dude in, like, where he was in, like, Ohio, but he used to, like, silence the RE35s to roll sound with them. So I had him redo it as well. He sent it back to me. I shot, like, experimental stuff. I have a lot of projects that, like, no one will ever see.
Cool.
Just because I do them for the outlet and for the sake of the expression. Yeah. And it was really, like, now as I kind of just keep doing it personally, like, it's less about doing it for like, oh, I got to put this on Instagram because if I don't put it, somebody's not going to like the picture, and then I won't get an opportunity. Like, now it's just like, oh, this is my creative thing, like, and it's mine, and like, I'm not going to show you anything because it's like an expression for me, and I don't feel like there's a need to monetize things. Like, I had a whole photo project that I shot on film. It was like 120 backs and 35s that I just followed, like, homeless people in downtown Miami, just sat, like, chatted with them and like, just shot photos. Like, we would eat lunch or go there, in the afternoons or whatnot. And it's just like this really beautiful kind of, like, photo journal of a moment in time with people that I got really close to, and that's, like, they're sitting in spools in my refrigerator, right? But I feel like the romanticized idea for me of that experience is better than seeing the pictures. But I know that I have them, you know what I mean? So it's like one of those things. Same thing, I don't make music to suck at it on top of it, but I don't make music to, like, do anything other than, like, man, I really have this sound in my head. How do I make it?
Yeah.
Because I suck at music, dude. Like, I have 50 guitars, and I'm bad at playing all of them. But it's just about, like, it really isn't about, I I got to get really technically good at guitars. Like, I really want to make this sound or I want to make a sound feel this way. How do I do it?
Yeah.
And that could be just like playing through a gazillion pedals and just warping it so it becomes something totally different. I think it's just expression for me. It's like what I like doing. It's like perspective, dude. Like, it's getting different perspectives from different people, like it changes the way that your brain works, that and like doing mushrooms, but
that's funny.
Yeah, but no, like like having your brain kind of like given access to like these different types of creative kind of changes the way that it fires. And like, with like everything else, with more experience in that world, like you kind of pursue things a little differently.
Yeah, and I think that this kind of segues perfectly into something else that I've been talking about recently, and it was specifically revolving around identity. There has been this very like monolithic, pick one thing and be great at it approach, as opposed to now there's the opportunity to be great at multiple things or good at various things and still be able to be happy, B, deliver on whatever work you need to deliver on, and C, feel like you are comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah, totally. I think that's like both a thing like that has to do with generational progress. My parents were super grateful for the opportunity they got when they moved here to Miami from Cuba, right? And then after that, what they instilled in me was like work ethic, and like you better bust your buns harder than anybody else to get the opportunity, because nobody's gonna give it to you, right?
Yep.
I think like one thing that's interesting is like, as like I said, like the generational growth, like people are less interested in that, like, oh, you gotta bust your buns harder than anybody. It's like now it's about refocusing to what you said, expression, what genuinely makes people happy. And I can tell you with certainty that's not going to work, like, but it, like, for me, it was finding a hole that I was like content with, and and like I right now in my career I'm like totally happy, right? Because I have the ability to be creative. As we keep maturing, I hope that it changes the way that industry leaders, run the industry. Don't think it will. As everybody, it's a bottom line business, and it'd be silly to think otherwise. But it's a beautiful idea. I hope it works.
Yeah, I hope it
like
at least starts creeping its way. I think it's already at least in the ether of conversation. It's just a matter of it being more accepted and more, actually implemented in terms of the way that certain companies operate.
That's gonna come with millennials getting those leadership positions, and even more when Gen Z enters like full force into that arena. I think we're gonna see fundamental change in the way that business is approached. I did a project that I got to go to Kentucky and shoot this mock government with Gen Zers, right? And I went with Josh Silva, who's a DP, great friend of mine, super talented dude. We both know him.
Yeah, of course. He works with us at BTA. And we've worked on plenty of projects.
He's super collaborative. But we were only supposed to film there one day. We got there the first day, and Josh was holding the camera, and like I just remember both of us like we like looked at each other in this moment. We're like, we have to shoot for like 2 days straight because this is like incredible, right? And seeing the duality of these kids, right, and what you would consider to be a very red state. They're kids, right? They're in high school, just starting out in high school, and they're just wearing suits, and everybody's just like proper, and then you got me with like fucking armholes asking you questions, and they are like they're genuinely more like their answers they were so good, right? They were so well researched, and seeing that duality, like, I'm sorry, but when I was their age, I was doing some dumb shit, like straight up. Like, these people are like really taking control, and not only that, they've grown up with this technology, so they know how from an early age to maneuver it. Yep. Like, I like use Instagram like an old person, like I like when I say I consume content, I straight up consume it. I don't partake in it, but I love the consumption of it, and I love the mentality switch by every generation. I think it's so cool, to like immerse yourself in that, not only because you learn more stuff, but it for me, it's always about what makes me better with human beings. Like, that's the one thing that we'll all have to do forever, is like interact with each other. So my whole experience has always been like, what's going to make me better with people? Yeah. Right?
And I think something else that's tied into all this is mental health, and how I think there's just been a higher strain on it, because as we're entering like post-industrial, highly technological and less labor intensive workforce, we're just thinking and coming up with ideas, and it's a lot of strain on your brain, and there's a lot of pressures that come with it. So I think that we all have kind of had a different conversation and a different experience with mental health and how to like avoid burnout.
Yeah.
How do you, make sure that you take care of yourself and are able to then, continue living a life that isn't, doesn't feel draining. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Oh my God. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think it's what was instilled in me at a very early age is like hustle, dude, hustle hard, and you'll get those opportunities. And my parents were right. Like I did hustle. I busted ass hard. I worked free, like I worked as hard as I could to get those chances. But part of that is understanding, to your point, how much of yourself to put into that. Right. And I still do struggle with how much of myself am I giving to these creative projects for work. Right. And that's different in and out of work, but it's knowing where to draw boundaries. And like, I didn't have them, like I was just like every project, it was like, okay, cool, I'll work overtime. Oh, okay, cool, I'll do this. Like, oh, okay, cool, I'll eat shit for another, 48 hours. And at the end of it, like, yeah, you end up with a fucking panic attack and in the hospital, dude. Like that shit happens. But
Yep.
So it's like you find those boundaries by experiencing them,
Yep.
or you learn. And I think that's what's really interesting about like the people coming into the workforce now. They're like, no, fuck you, eat my shit. And
Yeah.
I love that attitude, because that's exactly what people should be saying. Like, sorry, I don't care, I'm a human being, I gotta eat dinner. Like, I don't need to sit on this edit session. Like, you got 50 other guys here.
Yeah.
What is that? You
Yeah.
know, like, and nothing that we do, sorry, as advertisers is that important.
Correct.
Period. Like, that's just a fact.
Yeah.
Right. So the approach of these, again, it's a bottom line business. So when you it took me forever, it took me till I was 32 to realize that when you approach it that way, you're like, okay, cool, here's my cutoff, because this is what you're paying me.
Yep.
I never knew that.
Yep. Absolutely. And so I think that perfectly kind of guides us into the next, topic that I wanted to discuss.
Which one of these? Pointed out.
This
to
little
me
box over here,
Jesus.
which is about insights and everything you've learned over the years. And obviously, avoiding burnout or learning what your boundary is one of them. Are there any other insights that maybe you could tell you wish you could tell someone that was in your shoes 10 years ago, just entering into a production role?
I think what the cool thing, and like I said, and I think the generational progress is interesting, but one thing that I see a lot of is people coming into the work field as kind of feeling like they're owed something. That's not true either. You do have to kind of work for those things, but like one of those things that I wish I learned was like where to put boundaries. I wish I had that at an earlier age. It's like a pro and con thing though, because if I did have those boundaries, I don't think I would have the same opportunity.
Yeah.
So it's a catch-22, Something else that I kind of wish that I would have told myself is to like really prioritize, your own creative pursuits. I think like, looking back, I have a lot of respect for filmmaking, right? That's where kind of like my genuine, passion came from. And I see, some of these pursuits that are like haphazardly started, or like I just got to this point, or I got to a script but I never finished it, or I got to this but I never, like, I look back against some of the movies that I really appreciate now and I'm like, damn, I had that same idea like 5 years ago. And that's to say like they made it better 100%, because like but to feel that you're like on to something and then like not finish it is like I feel like the biggest downside to like giving yourself fully to like work, whatever. So that's the two things, like don't burn out, don't have a panic attack, the doctors will look at you funny, and then do the things that like really just make you stoked to be alive, because like at the end of the day, that's all you have.
Absolutely.
Nobody cares about your work.
Yeah. And I guess as we wrap it up, are there any you said you consume a lot of media, are there any pieces of content, any films, any books that you've read recently that you feel are worth sharing, or that people should kind of like tune in on?
Well, I think like I'll start with a film. So Everything Everywhere All at Once has been easily the best film I think I've ever seen in my entire life. It's so well written, it's well directed, it's well choreographed, it's well acted, and it's got the most refreshing idea I've ever seen or heard of it's amazing. And it's also just so happens to employ my favorite philosophical idea of existential absurdity and all of these kind of pathways of existence. So I love that movie. It's a little out there, but it's easily one of the best movies I've ever seen.
Who directed it?
Oh my god.
Or who was maybe...
It's a directing... Oh my god, I totally forgot. They're directing partners, but it's the partners that did like Swiss Army Man. It's an A24 film. It's like I said, it's incredible. I forgot the director's name.
No worries. Is there any like specific streaming platform that people can watch on, or you watch it online?
Right now, it's in theaters, which is like kind of cool to see that come back. Cool. Like I had a super strange interaction at the theater. It was like go to the theater, and I was like one of those ones that they're like, oh, you grab a beer or wine or whatever. So I'm like at the bar grabbing a shot of tequila and a beer for a movie, which is the strangest. And I ended up talking to the guy there, and he was, he's a writer as well as studying film in Miami-Dade, and like we exchange numbers, and I'll probably give him a shout. Like nice. that to me is like the best part about being a producer, traveling out or whatever. Another thing, I guess a book that I've been reading aside from the Dave Grohl book, which is incredible. Like if you like Foo Fighters or appreciate Dave Grohl's music, like he's so cool, and getting to like hear him write from his head sounds interesting, and it really is. It's an interesting book. But there's this other book by Laura Gomez that I'm reading now that is pretty much a kind of a history of America and kind of like Latin America, which I find, was one thing that I kind of struggled with being born. Well, not struggled with, but I was born in Miami, raised by Cuban parents, went to school in Davie, and really worked in Fort Lauderdale, did some general market work. Like I kind of felt like there was always this detachment from my root. Mm-hmm. So reading this, I felt like was an important part of me reconnecting with that kind of part of myself. So yeah, it's a great book. I don't know the title, but I'll give it to you later. Cool. It's one I have a shitty memory, so thanks for bringing that out on this podcast.
No. It's part of it. I mean, I felt like, and we've talked about this on other episodes, it's like, I think also going over a pandemic kind of like gives you a little bit of brain fog, and things become a little bit more so you kind of start retaining things that are more present in mind, and like those other things go to the back.
Dude, my problem has always been that I'm just like so verbose that I get lost in my own thoughts, dude. Like I just start going and like I have too many ideas. I'm like, where was I 5 seconds ago? Yeah, so I mean, I'm just torched, dude. My brain's mush.
Cool. I mean, we usually wrap it up by asking if there's anywhere people can follow you or any website, but I know that you said you're not really posting any content.
I mean, look, I do post some of the work that I'm proud of. I mean, there's my site is my name, so www.gusgomez.com. And then my Instagram handle, which I haven't posted since like 2 years ago, is my name backwards. So it's SUG_ZEMOG. So Sugzemog, which is a pretty cool name. Yeah. I like that name. I may just go by that name now.
All right, man. Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for all of these things. Can I see more?
Yeah, there's plenty of sketches in there.
Dude, look at all these ideas, bro. That's crazy.